Why did humans start wearing clothes? The real story is stranger than you think. Every day before leaving the house, most of us do something so ordinary that we never stop to question it. We get dressed. But here's the mystery. For more than 99% of human history, clothing didn't exist. Our ancestors survived ice ages, predators, starvation, and brutal environments with little or no clothing at all. So what changed? Why did a species born naked suddenly decide to cover itself? Was it because of cold weather, modesty, protection? At first glance, the answer seems obvious, but the real story is far more complicated. In fact, the invention of clothing may have changed human history as much as fire, language, or agriculture, because clothes didn't just protect our bodies. They transformed how humans survived, migrated, cooperated, displayed status, and even understood themselves. And the strangest part, the first reason humans wore clothes might not be the reason you think. Ask most people why humans started wearing clothes, and they'll give a simple answer: to stay warm. It sounds reasonable. As humans moved into colder regions, clothing helped protect them from freezing temperatures. Case closed. Except it isn't. Because archaeologists discovered something puzzling. Early humans had already survived harsh environments long before sophisticated clothing appeared. They used fire. They built shelters. They gathered together for warmth. And some of our ancient relatives, like the Neanderthals, lived in extremely cold regions for thousands of years. So if cold alone wasn't enough to explain clothing, what was? The answer begins with a strange clue hiding in a tiny creature that most people hate: lice. Scientists discovered that human body lice evolved from head lice, but body lice can only survive in clothing. When researchers traced the evolutionary split between the two, they found something remarkable. It suggested that humans began regularly wearing clothes around 170,000 years ago, not millions of years ago. Not even close. In evolutionary terms, clothing was a surprisingly recent invention, which raises another question. What happened around that time that made clothing suddenly valuable? And that's where the story becomes fascinating. To understand clothing, we first need to understand a major transformation in the human body. Humans are unusual among mammals. Compared to chimpanzees, gorillas, or most other primates, we're remarkably hairless. Why would evolution remove something as useful as fur? Because fur solved one problem while creating another. Millions of years ago, our ancestors began spending more time walking long distances under the African sun. Unlike most animals, humans evolved into endurance specialists. We became capable of chasing prey for hours. But endurance creates heat. Lots of it. A thick coat of fur traps heat. Sweat releases it. Humans developed an extraordinary cooling system. We lost much of our body hair and gained millions of sweat glands. This allowed us to stay active when many animals were forced to rest. In a strange way, becoming less hairy helped make us one of the most successful hunters on Earth. But every evolutionary advantage comes with a trade-off. Hairlessness helped in hot environments, yet it created a new vulnerability: cold. As humans gradually expanded into unfamiliar regions, they faced temperatures their bodies weren't designed to handle. And nature had already taken away their natural insulation. Clothing became a way to solve a problem that evolution itself had created. But survival wasn't the only force at work. Because once humans started wearing clothing, something unexpected happened. Clothing began evolving beyond protection. It started communicating information. Here's what most people don't realize. The history of clothing is really the history of identity. The moment humans began wearing animal skins, woven fibers, or decorated garments, clothing became more than a shield against nature. It became a language. Without saying a word, clothes could reveal who you were: your tribe, your status, your skills, your beliefs, your wealth, your role in society. Anthropologists have found evidence that ancient humans often spent enormous amounts of time decorating clothing. They added beads, shells, pigments, animal teeth, complex patterns. From a purely survival perspective, these decorations were unnecessary. But from a social perspective, they were incredibly valuable. Humans are social creatures. We constantly evaluate each other: who can be trusted, who belongs to our group, who is important, who is attractive. Clothing helped answer those questions instantly, and that's where the deeper force emerges. Humans didn't create clothing merely because of the environment. They created it because of psychology, the need to belong, the need to signal identity, the need to communicate status, the need to tell a story about ourselves. In other words, clothing became one of humanity's first technologies of social influence, long before social media profiles, long before business cards, long before resumes. There were clothes, and they were already shaping human behavior. Fast forward to today. At first glance, modern fashion seems completely different from ancient animal skins, but the underlying psychology hasn't changed much at all. Think about it. Why do luxury brands exist? Why do uniforms matter? Why do certain styles become trends? Why do people spend enormous amounts of money on clothing that offers little practical advantage? The answer isn't fabric, it's signaling. The same psychological forces that motivated ancient humans still operate inside modern societies. A business suit communicates professionalism. A military uniform communicates authority. A sports jersey communicates loyalty. Designer clothing communicates status. Even people who claim not to care about fashion are sending signals through their choices. Because not choosing is still a choice. Clothing remains one of the fastest ways humans communicate identity. But there is another modern lesson hidden inside the story. Technology often begins as a solution to one problem and eventually transforms society in unexpected ways. Clothing started as protection, then became communication, then culture, then industry. Today, the global fashion economy influences billions of people. It shapes employment, manufacturing, advertising, social movements, and environmental challenges. What began as a simple survival tool became one of humanity's most powerful cultural inventions. And history is filled with examples like this. The internet was built for communication. It transformed politics. Cars were designed for transportation. They transformed cities. Clothing was created for survival. It transformed society. The deeper lesson isn't really about clothes. It's about human nature. Humans are unique because we rarely stop at solving problems. We build layers of meaning on top of everything we create. Fire became rituals. Tools became symbols. Language became culture. Clothing became identity. This pattern appears throughout human history. A practical invention emerges. Then, psychology takes over. People begin attaching meaning, status, emotion, and social value to it. And eventually, the symbolic function becomes as important as the practical one. That's why understanding history requires looking beyond simple explanations. The obvious answer is rarely the complete answer. Humans didn't start wearing clothes solely because they were cold. They wore clothes because survival, identity, cooperation, and psychology became intertwined. The physical world shaped the invention, the social world shaped its evolution, and those same forces continue shaping our lives today. So why did humans start wearing clothes? Partly because the environment demanded it, partly because evolution made it necessary, but mostly because humans are creatures who turn survival tools into social symbols. A piece of animal skin became a message became an identity became culture, and culture changed the world. The story of clothing isn't really about what humans chose to wear. It's about what humans have always done. We take what helps us survive and transform it into something that helps us belong. The first garments may have appeared hundreds of thousands of years ago, but the instinct behind them is still with us every morning when we decide what to put on. History rarely survives in museums alone. Sometimes it's hanging quietly in our closets. If you enjoyed this documentary, subscribe for more fascinating stories hidden inside everyday life.